Gamble used to say, or at least I took it to be Gamble's commentary. He was typically saying things that were on the sort of the risky edge, but amusing nonetheless. But he used to say, in the spring, a young man's fancy turns to landscape painting, and and so it does, and so it turns. If it turns to landscape painting, it turns also to viewfinders. So John Wellman asked this question here. I was very interested to hear of the prominent role of viewfinders in this discussion. Do you have any practical advice for making them, such as what sizes, ratios to carry on hand? And are there any practical tips on how to use a viewfinder, how to hold it consistently from look to look, whether to clipping it to something, etc.? So, yeah, and John, I want to say for anybody out there that, man, the world is full of people who need viewfinders or use viewfinders. You don't need to rely on me for that information. The plein air painters everywhere, have various versions of it. And I'm told a bunch of them are online, so I'll just do it because you asked. But and also because you're interested in what my angle on it is, my experience with it is. So I'm going to do two things. I'm going to show you the picture making thing, and then I'll talk about the viewfinder in the sort of landscape and sort of common use way. But viewfinder, you could call it a picture finder. You could call it, you describe it as a way of isolating the section of nature that you're going to paint when looking through when looking through it. If you had that Corot story, somebody was asking what he was painting, and he undoubtedly would have put up his hands. And he said, "That's that piece of land about this wide, about that far away, in that distance." I mean, and with a mentality of showing you the cropping of it. And a viewfinder really is about framing a picture. So if you're a landscape painter, painting outdoors, such as Corot was doing at times, or maybe most of the time, but and you have, well, I'll leave it at that for now. Let me just go through the whole process. I'll come back to that. But the need for a viewfinder is basically a fundamental need for an impressionist, a person painting from life. A portrait painter, if you're painting interiors, if you're painting still lifes, and for sure, in a landscape. And what it is a way of isolating what your subject is, isolating your center of interest, finding out where it lands on. I'll get into that more. But what I'll introduce you to, though, is the discussion we had with Gamble that was more than a viewfinder, or at least it gives you an idea what you're heading toward when you look at a viewfinder. So I'll just show you this. What we did in the studio was we cut these strips of brown paper, this old wrapping paper you can buy at the what do you call it? The post office. It used to be UPS or a place like that. Fairly thick, sort of rough, and we use it for a bunch of things, including, for example, laying in a painting like this, like laying in a study. And there was to be very careful, as accurately as we could, draw and study. And we would then use the viewfinders. As you see here, I've laid what looks like strips around this thing. It's just electronic, and then we would take the opportunity to search out our composition, moving the stretchers to make the canvas squarer or longer, or to moving all the stretchers to move the center of interest up or down. So you could have the center elevated, or you could have the center more left, more right, more et cetera, et cetera. And you'd use the viewfinder as a systematic way of assessing. And I can't tell you how important that is. I can't exaggerate the importance of the need to, when you're a student, to give yourself many, 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 many versions of the view. Right? Find out how tight it should be. How should the cropping be? Should that pile of stuff be? Should it be crowded? Should it be crowding the edge of the frame, or should there be lots of space around it? What I chose here was one that's somewhere in between, right? So that's the scale issue. But how high, how low, how left, how right? Left, right is the equilibrium issue, and all paintings need to be in equilibrium. And and then the location. So that kind of locating of the center of interest. But really, if you forget that you have a center of interest and that's the point of the picture, or that's sort of the area drives the picture in significant ways, you won't fully appreciate this. But anyway, this isn't a viewfinder, but this is capturing the framing. Okay, so we would do these drawings. It would go well past the edge of the frame, and the drawing would have gone way out here to the sides, and we would have gradually moved that thing around. And with Gamel's feedback, we would try a bunch of things. As a student, you never try enough stuff, but you need to learn to, because you think you know what your good picture is going to be. And sometimes you're not wrong, but other times you don't give yourself a chance at the potential poetry that's available to you, and something that you'd respond to even more than what your idea was. So I don't take any positions on it. I just, once I get this area of center of interest moving, I begin to say, now what do we got here? And where would it be in a painting? What kind of proportions do we have? How big in the painting? And I just look and look and look without any preconceptions, waiting for that music that I respond to. So what you're seeing, so what we did actually is we would lay strips, these brown papers on the floor, cut them about maybe 4 inches wide, and then fold them with a nice crease down the middle. That way you get a really nice straight edge on one side. The others might be a little ratty. We didn't do that at first, and we had a lot of trouble getting decent edges, but once we realized you could fold them and you get a stiffer frame. And then, and this is a picture of one of my students having done that recently. This is Margie. Thank you, Margie, for sending that. And so you can see how the strips lie. So she's pinning these in up here. You see this strip lying here, and she's pinned these 2 vertical ones into it. I actually recommend that you take these vertical strips. And remember, notice she's done this drawing, and it's on a big board, so this goes beyond where she needs it. By the way, you don't always have to do this life size. She seems to be doing it life size or something like that. But if you were trying to sort out a composition, you could draw it under life size, and then these, it wouldn't require such a huge board to have a lot of extra space for you to experiment with. And some people experienced people would say, well, why don't you just use your viewfinder in the first place and go through that process just with a little viewfinder. And I'll show you what that means in a second. But the underlying thing here is to give yourself lots of chances to see the possibilities of this composition. And so how big the center is, how far left, right, how big the center is to the frame, right? How far left, right, how far up or down. Gamble used to refer to the upper portion of the picture as the noble half of the picture. And so the idea that maybe you'd place your best stuff up in here, and it'd be like in a portrait, the head is elevated, and not, if you drop it too low, it starts looking like you're looking down on your sitter, that sort of thing. I've been there before with you in these discussions. But what I was going to say about these strips here, if you put these horizontal strips on first, right, and then you just bend these over the top, just stick them under and bend them over, you can just float them back and forth in 2 seconds. You slip this one, the vertical one here, behind the viewfinder. I know Margie does that at times, but this time she did it this way. And but you just do the 2 horizontals, and then just hang the other ones from them and tuck them behind. Just the opposite of what she did here. So if I turned this sideways, you'd say there's the top one, and this one here goes hooked over the top. So the hook of the bend you're going to make in the paper, hooking over the front. And it'll just stay up there, and you can just slide it back and forth. And sometimes this is a very the process is annoying sometimes, so you want it to be efficient. All this pin pulling out and pin putting in and that sort of stuff. So you'll find best ways to use it, but the idea is, though, to search out the placement of your center of interest and the scale of your composition, and then, of course, the proportions. Again, I'm repeating myself on that. So if you can follow me on this, so all I'm going to show you is that there are many ways to get yourself a viewfinder. One of them is to buy a pre-cut or have somebody give you from a frame shop or something, a throwaway what do you call that? Liner, it's the wrong word. A mat, for a picture. And then you just cut the ends off so that you have a pretty nearly, you have the ability to easily get a square. Am I showing that to the viewer? Yeah. You have easily have ability to get the square. And you can make it as long as you want. But what I do with this is I take the I take clips, paper clips, and I just hold it together with paper clips. And it gets to be quite a straightforward and easy process. These things are really thick. I don't know what I was doing with these. They're that really heavy, so I can't actually do it to this one. Let me show you this one instead for now. The values is an interesting question. What, do you want a black one, or do you want a white one, or do you want something in between? I rather favor the middle value ones. But here you can see, this is a bit of a beat up one, but here you can see the viewfinder. Okay, Polly. You can see the viewfinder, and let's find a proportion we like, and just clip it. All right, so there it is, just clipping the corner. And it'll stay in place. You move it with the clips. You move it and then reclip it whenever you move it. Make sure it's as square as you can get it. Make sure the rectangle is, the angles that are perpendicular and yours isn't not showing a skewed rectangle. But that's sorry about the beat upness of this one. But that gives you some idea of what I'm trying to do. And then what you can do is just change those things willy-nilly. If you go out there and you're going to paint a 9 by 12, you just set this at the proportions of 9 by 12. Now, another question you're asking me is how big to make them. This size is, I find, pretty good because you can get it fairly big. The viewfinders that they sell, the plastic ones that are movable, I don't find them particularly useful because they're too small. You look through them and to get the image you want, and it's very fuzzy, edged. It's a very fuzzy edged view, which means it's ambiguous. And so it's hard to see how precisely, where precisely your say your exits land and that sort of stuff. And but anyway, you'll find yourself getting yourself a nice, taking a view. And what I try to do, so yeah, this question of do you pin it to something, you don't hang on to this. What you do is you use your memory. And so you're looking through the viewfinder, and you notice, you hold it still, you get it where you sort of begin to sort out. Let's just say you go out with a 9 by 12. You go out there and you sort out that proportion. You put the proportion in here, right? Then you go outside and you try to. You go to the view, and you try to look through the viewfinder. You try to say, I'm going to try to do this over this way. I think it's better. And you're simply looking at it, and you're noticing where its optimal composition is, right? And that really does begin with the placement of the major effect, and then the distribution of those effects and the search for equilibrium. But as I said, it's a scale problem, so you bring it closer if you want the center of interest to get smaller, bring it closer to your eye. Push it further away, the center of interest will get more and more tight, and you'll be able to make that assessment. That's what I call scale, how big the center is to the frame. And then that whole thing about, you can move the thing left, move it right. Let yourself find the equilibrium of your center, of your balance of stuff. Really, it's more than the center. And then how high and how low do you want it? Which one expresses best and creates the best picture? Expresses best, I want to say your poetry, but leave it at the idea that one of them makes a better picture than another, just in the abstract. But I don't separate them much in terms of poetry. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't know whether you should use, whether it's absolutely best to use any value. I do have a viewfinder somewhere that has a gray side and a black side, and I think that's not a dumb thing. That's actually an interesting idea. So I don't know what else to say about that. That may be all there is. But if you can follow the idea, so I'll go back to that image. If you can go back to that image with the margins there, if you follow the idea, you're just trying to locate your center of interest and decide how big it is and where it is in the frame. It doesn't matter what you use. I don't mount it. I wanted to say that, reinforce this idea that I don't do something. The only thing is fixed is these corners, so I don't have to keep trying to hunt them up again. But you do have to, when you're looking through it, try to maintain this horizontal to vertical. These aren't skewing. You're looking at it crooked. But what you're looking for beyond so if you look at the margin here, if you're looking at it, you're looking for to memorize where exits are. So the exits, these kinds of exits, you want to memorize where they are in relation to the whole, or just simply get a feeling for that location there, for example, in relation to this width. How far left, how far right is that? Those sorts of things. Anything that's readable, and just memorize them, just learn them. I've never found you need to lean on. What you need to do is get a few that are approximately right. Do a bunch of note making out there, literally on the canvas in front of you. In other words, make your as your color marks are working, eventually gradually be finding your exits, and your power areas in your center, and you'll find that you'll start seeing your composition on there, and then then the rectangle is the view. The rectangle meaning your canvas is now the view. So yeah, and the idea, you look through a viewfinder, you're trying to get, as Ang would say again, and we've talked about before, you're trying to get a preconceived idea of the composition of the whole. The composition really is a description of the whole, right? So you're trying to get a preconceived notion of that general thing, including, what it does within that rectangle. Try to memorize, try to learn it. I'm not a big fan of anything related to the sort of mechanical stuff. I don't like gridding. I don't like any of that stuff. And I think those are too many things like crutches. And I think the liberty that you get, I think your paintings have a little bit more, likely to have in the long run a little bit more fluidity and all that sort of stuff if you use your memory. The more and more you use your memory and your eyes. And so I stay with that in everything that I do. But you can imagine that's based on what you've heard me say before. All right, let me just see if there's anything else I should really tell you here, or ask John. One thing you might note is that these things are put on these, fairly heavy boards that'll take tacks really nicely. And another thing to note is that when you put these on, make sure that your horizontals are really horizontal, your verticals are plumb, and your whole picture is plumb. But make sure that when you look it through the viewfinder, you're really looking at your real picture. You can distort it in ways that can be injurious. And the one last thing I would say, by the way, about this picture here, when you do this cropping, you have to allow, when you finally decide what canvas size to make. And believe me, this is the thing we do in this world. We actually stretch to custom stretch. We custom stretch. We don't automatically buy a 9x12 or an 18x24. And then do the best you can given that. With Gamble, we were always looking for the optimal composition. So we just did whatever worked best and had that analysis go on with Gamble. And when we found a composition, we didn't say, oh, but there's no stretchers that size. What I mean to say is it's not a standard size. There's nothing stretched that size. We would say, oh, this is 20 and a half by 30 and 3/4. What size shall I make it, right? Well, you just make it the next size up. Even if it's 20, this is the window size, as if you were looking through the frame, ideally, right? That's what that actually means. That's called the window or the light for the framer. But if you're looking through the viewfinder, if you're looking through the frame, the actual framing, that's what that is. So that if you now make the stretcher bars just as much bigger as you need to, anything from 3/4 of an inch, in fact, if you're an inch off, just stretch your canvas to an inch size bigger. If you're right on the inch perfectly, I meant to say. So if you accidentally stretch this thing and it's exactly 18x24, make it 19x25 canvas, because the frame has the capacity. It's going to cover some, and it has the capacity to cover as much as 3/4 of an inch. So you're better off to err on that side, is my view regarding that kind of thing. But understand that I know that's not probably exactly what you were asking, because I think when we talked about this, we were talking about the viewfinder in the what you do outdoors sort of way. And yet, to understand this is a pretty big thing. And this really gets you into a place, by doing it the Gamble's way, it gets you into a place where you can really think through your composition. You can actually slow the whole process down and move it around, try this, try that, and look, and give yourself time between looking and to be really objective to what's actually happening. And get you out of believing whatever your first thoughts were good ones. One of the things about students is your first thoughts are pretty ignorant. And so you may have a lot of sort of having looked at pictures, but in 20 years, you'll have looked at a lot more pictures, and your experience is going to give you, you're going to rely on it maybe more steadily. But I have decided, early on, to make sure I go through this thing and find the best one by trial and error, the best view, the best picture. Even of my still I've set up already there, I just find the best picture. The framing is such a huge piece of it, even after the still I've set up, that I still do it today. I still do trial and error. And because I'm always looking for the magic. By the way, I don't always use brown paper, not even by a little bit. I frequently go out there and paint. I have an interior and I have a frame. I decided I'm going to put a painting in that frame. I can say, okay, I'm going to create a composition that'll work, at a 25 by 30 size, because I have a frame and I want to get it out of here. And so at that point, you're back to the looking at whatever you set up in interior or whatever you're trying to do, and then you're back to looking through the viewfinder. Well, it's such a simple subject. I'm sure I may have left something out, but again, there's a lot of information online about that sort of thing, and some guys spend every minute of their life outdoors, so you'll get more finesse out of a lot of those guys. I'm all over the place with that, meaning I don't just paint outdoors, but I think those are some of the best guys to look at. Um, okay, well, John, thank you for your question, and we'll see you in the next one.